الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على النبي الكريم وبعد. To proceed, here continuing with those series that we started that were directed to studying the views of the scholars on the ruling of using modern day devices to create images and videos. So the first part of those series was part one that we did available online, the opinion of Sheikh Bin Baz, Al-Uthaymeen, Al-Albani, and Sheikh Muqbil, all of these great scholars on the ruling of photography and making videos and making use of cameras. The next part was part two, the discussion, does a camera take the ruling of a mirror? So it was munaqasha ilmiya, academic research, and mentioning both sides of the spectrum. And then part three is this final part that we have, the historical fact for how the opinion of using cameras for da'wah emerged. So just to give a background and a timeline of events of how we are to where we reach now and the stages. So I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible. It's a lot of content, but we have to try to summarize as much as possible. There's a lot of books that have been written, particularly on this science. It's a matter that is to be researched and looked into with sincerity. The one that has an open heart for the truth, he will find it. It is ضالة المؤمن الحق ضالة المؤمن. It's a lost item or lost thing for the believer. He's always on search for it. And researching it from an academic point of view, looking at the views of these great scholars and the ways that they've reached to their verdict is important for a student of knowledge to look at. And part one was more so to mention what those great scholars died upon and the marahil, the stages that they went through. We clarified it with their dates, with tarikh, with the timeline, and some of them went through perhaps 3 stages. And also we clarified that even with their stages, they made restrictions to their verdicts. However, it was portrayed those verdicts in an unrestricted matter. So for that reason, we clarified that the view of a scholar is to be shared as he restricted it, with its guidelines and with its quyud, with every point that he mentioned that perhaps may show there's a difference in what people do nowadays. And then they refer back to these great scholars. So those who, we're going to share it at the bottom of this video, the link to part one and part two. Part two was more of a discussion if these modern day devices take the ruling of tasweer that's prohibited. So it was more of an academic discussion. We've pointed out both sides in an honest manner, trying to share what they've seen and what the responses were academically. But it, in a nutshell, is as one person commented under the YouTube video, that if you look into the technology of the video, you'll see that there are only thousands of still shots moved across a lens with light shined on them. Same way cartoons are made by moving thousands of drawings fast across a lens. And this is the truth of the matter. And we know that the people of this production, they will tell you that this is picture taking. And this is image making. And you're producing and creating images with these devices. And يطلق عليه تصوير لغة وعرفا. And also, lastly, شرعا. So from all viewpoints that we look at, so when we look at the lens of the linguistic point of view, we see that it meets it as picture taking. And we look at it from the customary, they call it picture taking, and what people refer to as the person doing so as musawwir al-video, they call it musawwir. And then when we look at it in this legislative point of view of why taswir was prohibited, we find that it all meets those requirements, and it meets it fully, as we addressed in that video, and we clarified the matter is not that it's just a mere reflection of a mirror. And Sheikh Muhammad Ibrahim Ali Sheikh, that Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia previously, he has an article where he was, at that time when this opinion was first introduced that it's not picture taking, he clarified that these devices have about 12 amaliyah, about 12 processes that they go through. And that is just not a particular affair that you can say it's a mere reflection. So with the development, we say that it still has a process and a procedure, and it is not just like black and white as people may show it, as that is just a mere reflection. It's not a matter as they portray it, unfortunately. طيب, moving on now to the final part. This final part is to address the view of those scholars that deem making use of these modern day devices for picture taking to be haram, but they're making an exception for da'wah related material or da'wah related causes. So we're going to address that opinion. So this is restricted to those scholars who had that view, that they say is impermissible except for da'wah-related objectives, inshallah. طيب, so how this opinion first emerged, just to give you a background, is, as Sheikh bin Baz once mentioned in a question that he was asked, where he clarified that some scholars believe that there's no objection to appear on television, so as long as it is for the purpose of calling to the truth, spreading the rulings of Islam, and refuting the callers to falsehood. This belief is based on the Sharia-based principle stating that it's permissible to commit the lesser of two evils. So that's how it first started, that this was lesser of two evils. They considered it to be an evil, but lesser of two evils. Lesser of two evils to ward off of the greater evil in the case where it is not possible to avoid both evils, as it is permissible to bring about the greater of two interests by sacrificing the least of them if both of them cannot be brought about. The same applies to the case of there being many evils and interests, and if it's not possible to ward off all evils, rulers and scholars must exert themselves to ward off the greatest and most sinful evil. So this is the context. That it first emerged that this being referred as an evil, and that if you have no other choice and no way possible to ward it off except by carrying it out, the lesser of the two evils. So this is how it first emerged, and that during that time period there was various opinions. And as Sheikh bin Baz mentioned, and we can share these quotes, all these fatwa are taken from Al-Ifta, the website, it's translated. This is a controversial issue and subject to different views. And the first stages of Sheikh bin Baz is that he had somewhat of clear answers and somewhat that were not so clear of answers. And then we'll mention the final stages of Sheikh bin Baz. He says recording lectures on audio cassettes where there's no need for visualizing images is permissible. Yet sometimes there's a need for recording videos so that the identity of the speaker can be clearly known. And this is from the reasons that the identity of the speaker can be known. There may be other reasons which make recording a necessity. Nevertheless, I have great reservation about, and the translation is not best here, taharruj. I have great feeling of refraining about visual recording due to the hadith narrated regarding the ruling on tasweer. Then he says, however, a group of Muslim scholars nowadays viewed that there's no harm in this if there is some warranting public interest. But I myself am reluctant to approve this practice due to the great danger in tasweer. As well as, he mentions there's a hadith that make it quite clear that the people who do so will be mostly severely punished on the day of resurrection. And then he ends up by saying, may Allah grant us success. So, just giving you a general understanding of how some of them may start it off of them deeming it to be evil, but due to them seeing that it is a lesser of two evils with a greater benefit, and also for the purpose of identifying the speaker, these are what some of the reasons that it first emerged with. And we'll mention further of how some of them incline to that in the practice. Here's a clip of Sheikh Salih Al-Usaimi clarifying.
لكن لما اضطر إلى ذلك على وجه الاضطرار للمحرم والضرورة تبيح المحظور أجابوا إلى ذلك تلبية لرغبة ولي الأمر في تصدرهم لإفتاء الناس.
So he mentions that some of the scholars, some of them felt that they had a necessity to do so because of to answer the call and the requests of the Wali al-Amr, the ruler, in fulfilling the ifta position, the fatwa position.
وأنه إذا ترك إفتاء الناس في مثل هذه القنوات تسلط غير المتأهلين في الفتوى فأجابوا إلى ذلك فلا يستدلن أحد بهذه الأفعال على أن ينسب إلى فلان أو فلان أنه يجوز التصوير لمجرد ظهور صورته أو وجودها بل ينظر إلى كلامه المفصل وما تشابه فإنه يطرح. نعم.
So he clarifies that they felt the need, the dire need to come forward because of their position of ifta. If they don't do so, then someone else will step forward to give fatwa. And they felt that it was upon them to do so. This is what he mentioned, and it's not because of them seeing it to be permissible. So this is what one of the mentions, what we mentioned, how it's first started. We also mention another clip of how this opinion first emerged. And just bear in mind that these scholars that we're clarifying, we have already clarified that it's not because they see that these modern devices don't take the ruling of tasweer. And we clarified that previously. Here we'll share again, inshallah, just an example of that. Here's some words of Sheikh Zayd al-Madkhali, rahimahullah.
أصل التحريم وهو من الكبائر وعلى هذا ماشى الشيخ عبد العزيز بن باز رحمه الله يرى بأن التحريم عام بأي وسيلة من الوسائل كان التصوير مع أن بعض العلماء المعاصرين فرق بين التقاط الصورة وبين نحتها والأحاديث الواجب البقاء على عمومها حتى يأتي ما يخصص.
So here are some words of Sheikh Zayd Madkhali clarifying that, for example, Sheikh bin Baz and other scholars, is that they held that this is a major sin and that it's general for all devices, whatever means it is, and all these devices. And he mentioned that there is an opinion out there that made a distinction, but he said what is wajib is to leave it upon its generality. So pointing this forward is that this is opinion, we're not mentioning it from an angle, if it's excluded from prohibition or not, but is this an exception for da'wah purpose or not? This is the discussion at hand, inshallah. And here's some words of Shaykh Muqbil rahimahullah on the matter.
بحجة أن المحاضرة ستنقل إلى بلاد سؤال ما حكم تصوير المحاضرات بالفيديو بحجة أن المحاضرة ستنقل إلى بلاد بعيدة مثل أمريكا وأمثالها؟
لا سؤالنا البركة من الله.
So Shaykh Muqbil was asked, what is the ruling of videotaping lectures with the excuse that is going to reach to far distant places like America? So Shaykh Muqbil responds by saying, starting off his answer, Barakah is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
رب كلمة تقال في مجلس صغير فتطير في الآفاق، ورب كلمة يرددها الناس أو الحزبيون وغيرهم وتنتهي معا ولا يصير لها أثر. فأنا أقول مسألة التصوير تعتبر محرمات.
So he mentions that perhaps one small gathering of words, of nice words upon khair, can reach far distant places. And perhaps words that have been repeated by some partisan individuals, it doesn't get that far. And he says, as for tasweer, picture taking, then that is considered to be haram.
الرسول صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يقول كل مصور في النار، ويقول الرسول صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم كما في حديث أبي هريرة في جامع الترمذي يخرج عنق من النار فيقول إني وكلت بثلاثة بكل جبار عنيد ومن جعل مع الله إلها آخر وبالمصورين. ويقول النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم من الملائكة لا تدخل بيتا فيه كلب ولا صورة معا والمساجد.
So he's mentioning the proofs for it to be impermissible. We're just going to give a bridge translation.
حلقات العلم فيها مباركة لأن النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يقول ومن اجتمع قوم في بيت من بيوت الله يتلون كتاب الله ويتدارسونه فيما بينهم إلا نزلت عليهم السكينة وحفتهم الملائكة وغشيتهم الرحمة. شهدنا من هذا حفتهم الملائكة، لكن أولئك المصورون يطيرون الملائكة من المجلس. بارك الله فيكم.
So he mentions that the angels encircle the gatherings in the masajid, but because of these devices and these picture taking occurring, they perhaps are chased away due to these images being brought forward in the houses of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. This is his opinion.
إن هذا منكر يجب إنكاره بحسب الطاقة، لا تحدث فتنة. إذا لم تستطع أن تغير المنكر خرجت والله المستعان. والرسول صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يقول من رأى منكم منكرا فليغيره بيده فإن لم يستطع بلسانه فإن لم يستطع بقلبه وذلك أضعف الإيمان.
So here he mentions that it is an evil that he deems that a person should critique according to his capability without causing a greater harm. Here's some words of Sheikh Muhammad Bajamal speaking about how the barakah of Sheikh Muqbil's da'wah, even without the affair of picture taking, how it reaches the furthest of places. Because the excuse for da'wah, they said in order to reach further places, you need this. So it's a necessity. So here's an example of Sheikh Muqbil's da'wah.
الإمام الوادعي رحمه الله ما بدأ إلا ب5 نفر. 5 وما توفاه الله عز وجل إلا وقد أقر الله عينه بالآلاف المؤلفة الذين تتلمذوا على يده.
So he mentions that Sheikh Muqbil first started his da'wah with just 5 people. And then he didn't die except he was seeing what brought joy to his eyes of seeing so much people coming forward for the khair and thousands and thousands.
جلاد ولا دولة ولا في اليمن، ومع ذلك دعوته شقت الفيافي والقفار، بل وتجاوزت البحار ووصلت إلى أدغال إفريقيا وإلى ما وراء النهر وإلى أمريكا، وما كان مع هذا العالم شيء، لا تصوير، لأن كثير من الناس يقولون أن التصوير خير ودعوة. يا أخي انظر هذا دليل كافي.
So he mentions that his da'wah, Sheikh Muqbil's da'wah, reached to the furthest of places and the most in-depth of corners of different parts of the world. And he didn't even have this affair of requiring to have his classes or his talks or to come on a particular broadcast with his image, and it went the furthest of places. He says this is enough as a proof that it's not a necessity.
دليل كافي. عندنا النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم دعوته انتشرت بدون تصوير، أبو بكر وعمر وعثمان وعلي، وهم في أوساط المشركين وفي أوساط الأمم التي ما عرفت إلا الضلال.
So we have the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as example, Abu Bakr and Umar. Their da'wah went to the furthest of extent, and they were in the midst of the mushrikeen, who perhaps had what they would do of have an image being portrayed and shared with their letters or described. And this is the Prophet ﷺ whose da'wah went to furthest of places. We're following a message that we haven't even seen, and his da'wah went to the furthest of places.
ولا عرفت إلا الوثنية ولا عرفت إلا الشرك. ومع ذلك لو كان التصوير من الدين ومما هو مندوب له لوجه الله عز وجل نبيه لذلك، ولرسم الصحابة صورة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وجعلوا تحت الأحاديث والكلمات ونشروها عند الناس حتى يتأثروا بذلك، لكن هذه ليست من دعوة الله.
So he mentions that if there was some sort of need that is part of the deen as a means of da'wah, and it was such a great affair that needed clarification, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have clarified it. And it's the point that to reach this level that it had to go through the stage, the deen would have clarified it. So I want to mention here another statement that some of them use regarding wasa'il da'wah. They say means of da'wah, because it's a discussion. Is means of da'wah tawqifiyya? Is it restricted to a text, or is it open to ijtihad? That people can do ijtihad?
يقول فضيلة الشيخ وفقكم الله، هل وسائل الدعوة إلى الله توقيفية بمعنى أنني لا أدعو إلا بوسيلة قد دعت بها الرسل؟
نعم، لا بد من هذا، ولا تحدث وسيلة من عندك، لا تحدث وسيلة من عندك.
So here Sheikh Salih Fawzan was asked, are means of da'wah, the methods and approach that people take, are they restricted to the text, or is it people have some scope to do out of their own judgment that they derive of what's benefit? He said, yes, it is restricted to text. Do not be creative from your own. And also here's a particular example of the words of Sheikh Salih Fawzan.
فضيلة الشيخ وفقكم الله، التصوير جعله بعض الناس في هذا الزمان من وسائل الدعوة المعاصرة ومن وسائل نشر الخير.
يعني المعصية تكون وسيلة للدعوة.
So the questioner says, "Oh Shaykh, some people have made picture taking a means of da'wah in this day and age." So the Shaykh replies, is picture ma'asiyah a means of da'wah?
تصوير طاعة ولا معصية؟ معصية. كيف نجعل المعصية وسيلة للدعوة؟ نعم. الواجب ندعو على ترك التصوير لأنه منكر.
So he asks, is picture taking a sin or not, or obedience? So he asked, is this affair a sin or obedience? And then the Shaykh said, this is ma'asiyah. So we must call to leaving it off. And here's some words of Shaykh Abdul Muhsin Abbad asked a similar question.
تصوير الفيديو المتحرك للدعاء لنشر الدعوة.
الناس كانوا من قديم الزمان يعني يقوموا بالدعوة على ما يرام وليس عندهم تصوير.
So he was asked for picture taking for the purpose of da'wah, for the du'at. He mentions that from the past of times, people were doing da'wah beautifully for so long, periods of time, and it was going so well without the need of picture taking. So this is his answer. And also I want to point out some words of Shaykh Abdul Karim al-Khudair about those who use this affair and say that we're using it for da'wah, despite it being something wrong originally.
بتحريم التصوير لكنه يجيزه في الدعوة الحاجة لأنه لا يمكن الوصول للناس إلا من خلال التصوير في هذا العصر.
والله ما لا شك أن الأمور مقاصدها، لكن كما قال عمر فإن ما عند الله لا ينال بسخطه.
So someone asked Shaykh Abdul Karim al-Khudair about those who permit it mainly for da'wah. So he says, no doubt people, it's based upon people's intentions, but the affair is like what Umar ibn Khattab says, that you cannot attain what is with Allah of reward through His displeasure. I mean, this is something initially of the displeasure of Allah, how we're attaining the reward of Allah through this matter. So from the matters that people have said that there's a necessity for the sake of spreading knowledge, or there's a huge need, Shaykh Salih Fawzan, when he was clarifying, was asked about recording the circles of knowledge and lectures if they falls into the hadith that the picture makers are cursed. He said, yes, it does fall into the hadith. There's no dire necessity to record the lectures with a camera. The knowledge-based lectures can be tape recorded, listened to, written down. You can achieve the same results without having to record with a camera. Here's some words of Shaykh Albani rahimahullah. He said, أين الضرورة المدعى في سؤالك بأن يبرز المحاضر أو الواعظ أو المعلم أو الفقيه أو المحدث بشخصه فقط. So where's the ضرورة that you claim that the muhadhir lecturer or the person giving a talk has to come up apparent and show himself? He said, أنا لا أنكر أن لبروز الشخص بصوتي وذاتي تأثيرا للناس. He said, I do not deny that him coming forward with his voice and his appearance has enough impact on the people. ولكن ليس من ضرب الضرورات. It is not from the affair of ضرورة. وإنما هو من ضرب الكماليات. Rather, it's from the matters of perfection. فإذا كنا متفقين على تحريم الاستعمال. He says, if we're agreed that it's wrong using for example, television and the likes of that, then he says it is not permissible for just kamaliyat, perfections. And here's some words of Sheikh bin Baz, because the final verdict of Sheikh bin Baz regarding for da'wah purposes, that's what's quoted by most of his senior students and also some of the renowned scholars. As we've even asked Sheikh Abdul Aziz Rajihi ourselves, and we've shared the verdict of Sheikh Zayd al-Madkhali and others. They have quoted, even in his biography, that what he died upon is that he would incline that it's to be avoided. Here's a verdict of Sheikh Baz being asked.
يظهر الصورة
الله ما داخل فيه لأنه يثبت في الورق يثبت.
So he's asking about tasweer videotaping. And he says what is apparent is included because it has to be captured on what he said as a paper or of that sort.
أقول الله أنه يثبت في الورق إذا كان التصوير يثبت ومكان ما يثبت إنما يؤخذ من غير ثبات يرى من غير ثبات هذا ما يضر. أما إذا كان لا يثبت في ورقة أو في خرقة أو في شيء لا يجوز.
ويثبت في شريط أسود لكن إذا ظهر التلفزيون ظهر بصوت.
لكن في الشريط اللي صور فيه يثبت فيه.
نعم يثبت.
هذا
ما يضر أسود لون الشريط أسود.
So they're talking about the film cassettes, the old ones. And so Sheikh said if it's in those cassettes, then it's captured therein. And the person saying, but it's black, Sheikh. You can't see it.
ما يبي في صورة.
ظهرت سوء.
بس الشريط ما يبان شيء. الشريط ما يظهر شيء. سواد.
ظهر بالصورة
الله أن تعمه الأخبار. يسمى صاحبه مصور يا ظهر.
So even with them telling him that you can't really see it on the actual cassette, but he says what's apparent is that it's included because you call the person a musawwir, picture taker by it, even by videotaping.
بين الناس يسمى صاحبه مصور لأن إذا على ما قال محمد ظهرت الصورة بين الناس رجال ونساء والشلاب وحمير شجر وحجر كله.
يستطيع أن أحسن الله عليك إيقاف الفيديو على شاشة.
لأن المقصود هو الصورة والصورة ظاهرة. الرسول لعن كل مصور اللهم صل على وسلم. وهذا تظهر الصورة كاملة أمام الناس.
لكن أحسن الله عليك من باب تعليم الدين هنا في التفاز يظهر الصورة من باب علم الناس.
يعلم مثل ما علم النبي الأمة الرسل علموا الأمة من التصوير الصحابة علموا الأمة من التصوير اللهم صل.
So he was asked, what about for ta'lim, educational purposes? He says, like how the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, they taught the ummah without using tasweer. So this is from the answers, also from the answers of Sheikh Baz. He was asked, ما حكم التغسيل والتكفين عن طريق الفيديو? And doing washing the deceased and shrouding him through video. He says التعليم يكون بغير الفيديو لما في الأحاديث الكثيرة الصحيحة من النهي عن التصوير ولعن المصورين. It should be with other than video because of the amount of numerous hadith that are authentic and prohibiting picture taking and the cursing of them. And this is from أسئلة الجمعية الخيرية بشقراء, a tape. And Sheikh Mubil mentioned ومنكر عظيم أن يقوم المحاضر في المساجد يحاضر الناس والمصورة الكاميرا موجهة إليه أو موجهة إليه. He said it's a great evil to be a person giving a lecture in the masajid and he's giving a lecture to people and the camera is facing him like this. And this is taken from his book حكم التصوير. Also Sheikh Ahmed Najmi, he mentioned a similar affair. التصوير بالكاميرا لا يجوز هذا الذي أعتقده أدين الله به لا أتزحزح عنه. نعم لا يجوز التصوير باليد ولا بالكاميرا. So التصوير with camera is not permissible. And this is what I believe and I seek nearness to Allah with, and I'm not going to change my stance upon it. Yes. So he said whether it be with the hand or by the device of a camera, it's not permissible. And here's some words of Sheikh Abdullah bin Humaid. He says وقد تستحسن بعض العقول استعمال هذه الآلة المسمى بالتلفزيون ظنا منها أنها أداة تثقيف وتعليم. Some people may use the device of television assuming that it's a device for education, teaching, وأداة لنشر فضائل, way to distribute merits of خير. ولم تنتبه العقول لخطورتها, and people didn't really pay attention about its harm. وما يعرض على شاشتها ولم تعرف قواعد الشريعة صحيحة بل كلما تجلى أمامها من نور مزيف مآله إلى الظلمة وكلمات معسولة التي بها السم الزعاف. So he mentions that there's those who say they perhaps didn't really pay attention to the great harm that's found in the device, for example, of television. And that's why you find some of the people who were from there, who inclined to that, they even attested that the harm outweighed the good, because people are saying that it's permissible لمصلحة راجحة, for a greater benefit, or lesser two evils. In fact, we find that it's more of an evil, as some have mentioned.
وهذا من تقدم في العلم الذي جر على البشرية شرورا عظيمة، كما جلب لها أنواعا من الخير، إلا أن كثيرا من شروره أربت على محاسنه.
So here Sheikh Saleh Al-Luhaydan mentions through the development of technology, it brought about a lot of good and brought a lot of evil, but he says the evil, I see that it outweighed the good. So this is the truth of the matter. So those who say it for a greater benefit, it's not true. And here are some words of Sheikh Muhammad Salih Al-Uthaymeen, where he says, وَأَمَّا التِّلْفَازِ فَإِنَّا نُحَذِّرُ مِنْهُ وَعَنْ اقْتِنَائِهِ مُطْلَقًا. So that's for television, we warn from it and possessing it absolutely, with no restrictions. وَنَقُولُ مَا يَنْبَغِي لِلْعَاقِلِ أَنْ يَقْتَنِيَهُ. It's not a person for anyone of intellect to possess it. وقال لكن في الوقت الحاضر شره أكثر من خيره. He says, well, in this period of time, the evil that's found is more than the good. So, this is from the advice, and it's taken from the رسالة الإبراز في أقوال العلماء في ظهور شاشة التلفاز. And also here some words of Sheikh Mubil. He says, يأتي لنا بفتوى صاحب الفضيلة أنه قد أجاز أن يتصور الشخص في التلفزيون وأن يتصور في الفيديو من أجل الدعوة إلى الله. He said, لسنا مفوضين في دين الله وما النصر إلا من عند الله. He says, some people come and use the fatwa of the scholar permitted for da'wah. He says, we're not authorized to issue verdicts how we want regarding the deen of Allah. And this goes back to legislation, and victory only comes from Allah. So meaning for you to say this for da'wah or this, or to aid the deen of Allah, that doesn't go back to our istihsan of what we see to be good. And also he says, لسنا نستطيع أن نحقق لدعوة شيئا إذا لم يرده الله ولن يحقق لنا الله سبحانه وتعالى شيئا إلا إذا كنا مستقيمين متمسكين بسنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. He says, we're not able to achieve anything with da'wah of what Allah, unless it was something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended, if Allah didn't intended it. So these are from the words, and also he mentions ولا يكون التعليم بوسيلة محرمة لكن الناس يتكلفون الآن حتى الصلاة بدأوا يجيبون المصلي راكع وساجد ويديه كذا وكذا يتوضأ يجيبونه وهو يتوضأ. People now have went and burdened themselves. He said this is a means that's impermissible. They went to burden themselves even how to show how a person's praying, how he's doing wudu. They said all of this for the purpose of da'wah. Sheikh Albani here, he says, some words quoting from him, بينما إذا كان المقصود هو التعليم فيحصل بمجرد أن يسمع الناس كلام المتكلم وهذا كاف في تحقيق المصالح الشرعية. If it's attention just for education, that occurs by the person, speaker, people hearing the speaker's speech. That's sufficient in obtaining the maslaha, the interest of the legislation. And he says, ولا يوجد لدينا ما يسوغ لنا نتخذ هذه الوسيلة وسيلة دعوة تعليم وإرشاد والبديل عندنا موجود دون تعرض لأي مخالفة للشرع. He said, we don't have to take this prohibited when we have enough substitute alternative, which is the speech. And he's referring to at that time the radio. He says, ما الذي يستفيد الجمهور أن يرى المحاضر الفلاني هو فلان وصوت هو الصوت الذي يسمعه من الراديو في التلفاز فقط أنه يرى الشخص. أنا قلت لك سلفا لا شك أن بروز الشخص بشخصه وصوتي معا بالتأكيد له أثر على المشاهدين والسامعين معه من أن يقتصر على أن يسمعوا الصوت دون أن يراه الشخص. أنا أعرف هذا. لكن he says لكن هل هذا من المسوغات لارتكاب ما أصله محرم؟ لا. إذن يكفي أن يستعمل الراديو. So in summary, he says most of the people, what do they really benefit of just seeing the person and hearing his voice? So yes, there is an impact, but is it what justifies for something to do something that was initially haram. And the person said no, so he said it was sufficient to use the radio in that time.
الشيخ وفقكم الله يقول ما حكم التصوير؟ ما حكم التصوير؟ وهل فضيلتكم يجيزه أثناء الدرس؟ حيث إني رأيت أحد الطلاب يقوم بتصويركم بالجوال فأنكرت عليه، فهل فعلي هذا؟
لا نجيز هذا. إذا سألونا نمنعهم من هذا، أما إذا فعلوا ما درينا عنهم هذا إثم عليهم.
So here Sheikh Salih Fawzan asks about someone recording with the camera or taking a picture through the camera. And he says that we don't permit that. If they do that without asking us or us not knowing, he says that's their affair. And this is what Sheikh Salih Fawzan would refer to in most of his talks. When we hear a plate.
يقول فضيلة الشيخ وفقكم الله هذا العصر كما يقولون هو عصر الإعلام، فما حكم تصوير المحاضرات والندوات وخطب الجمعة من الحرمين أو غيرهما بكاميرا الفيديو لنقلها في الإذاعات والتلفاز للعالم ليستفيد منها العالم كله؟ هذه مسألة فايتتنا، تصوير في التلفزيون في المسجد الحرام والمسجد النبوي فايتتنا، ما لنا فيها تصرف ولم يسألونا، وأنت إذا عرفت الحكم تبي تروح تمنعها لا تستطيع.
So he mentions what happened with the haram of it being displayed and broadcast and so forth. He says that they didn't ask me. He says, and if you know the ruling, and it's not in his hands to prevent it. They didn't ask him.
نعم. يقول فضيلة الشيخ وفقكم الله هل يجوز لي أن أعقد أما أنت فلا تصور، أما أنت في نفسك فلا تصور.
He said, as for you, do not do it. So this is what we will find Sheikh Salih Fawzan, other people doing it without seeking his permission, or him doing it himself, he wouldn't do it. This is, or something they encourage, or being that it's all these people is overwhelmed, perhaps this is what's happening, but it's not something he says like he can prevent, because they didn't initially ask him. And it's become wide all over. So this doesn't mean that the Shaykh is permitting it. And here's the verdict of Shaykh Nasir al-Din al-Albani rahimahullah.
يقول السائل: هنالك من يرى تسجيل المحاضرات الدينية لبعض المشايخ على أشرطة الفيديو ظنا منه أن لها تأثيرا أكبر وآكد من التسجيل العادي، فهل يلحق هذا بالتصوير المحرم أم له حكم خاص به؟
أعيد علي السؤال.
يرى بعض الناس تسجيل المحاضرات الدينية لبعض المشايخ على أشرطة الفيديو ظنا منه أن لها تأثيرا أكبر وآكد من التسجيل العادي، فهل يلحق هذا بالتصوير المحرم أم له حكم آخر؟
ليس له حكم آخر وإنما يلحق بالمحرم.
So Sheikh Albani was asked about those who permit videotaping of lectures because of it having a greater impact than just hearing the voice. And so they're asking, does this take a different ruling? He said, no, it doesn't have a different ruling. It takes the ruling of what is haram.
لأن التصوير لا يجوز إلا في حدود الضرورة أو الحاجة الملحة، وأن أظهر أنا على شاشة التلفزيون ليقول الناس الألباني تحدث وتكلم، هذا في الحقيقة كما قلنا في بعض المجالس قريبا، وهو الحديث أنه بحسب المرء من الشر أن يشار إليه بالأصابع، فهذا الذي يظهر في التلفزيون هو كما قلت أيضا في مناسبات كثيرة.
So here Sheikh Albani, he points out that for him to come out and show that people see that Sheikh Albani, this is him speaking, he said this is not what permits. I mentioned hadith is sufficient for a person that fingers are pointed towards. I mean, it's a huge fitna. Yes, that can be found in everything, a lot of other positions, but he's showing that's a great fitna. And here's some words of Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan. He says, الدعوة من أهد الأنبياء عليه الصلاة والسلام وهي قائمة from the da'wah from the time of the end prophets and anbiya is being established. وما استعمل بها تصوير فلا حاجة إلى التصوير لا حاجة إلى التصوير الدعوة تقوم بدون التصوير ولا يستعمل محرم من أجل الدعوة. So he mentions that from the time of all the prophets, da'wah was being conveyed and going forth without taswir. So we shouldn't use something haram for da'wah. And yes, there are certain opinions attributed to Shaykh Salih Fawzan for live stream without recording it. He may make an exception to it. And there's some who have attributed opinion. But we're talking about recording it and how it is now. This should not be attributed to the Shaykh. Taib also, here's the advice of Shaykh Rabi' when he gave to the scholars that were coming out on television. He said, أرى أن لا يخرج المشايخ في التلفاز وأن يحتفظوا بهيبتهم ومكانتهم بترك الخروج في التلفاز وليقتصروا على النور على الدرب. He says, I see that the mashayikh should not come out on television and they should preserve their reverence and their positioning, their status by leaving off coming out like in this manner. And should be sufficient with nurun ala darb. How much barakah happened with that radio station. And also for Shaykh Muhammad Salih al-Uthaymin, we clarified his positionings and his state. And the last opinion that he was upon, even though during those other stages, the amount of times that he actually took a lecture or talk in front of a camera is mahsura bil-adad al-asabi. It's counted, you can restrict it. It's just a few. They said he wasn't even comfortable. And we have an audio of a person who was speaking to Shaykh Albani, mentioned that even though academically at those times he used to permit it, but as the Sa'il says, ما كان يبغى أن يصور. He would not like it, he would still be comfortable. So tatbiqan, practically, he wouldn't be okay with it. But academically, at those stages that he was, but even in the latter stance before he died, we'll mention here of some words of Sheikh Muhammad Bajamal mentioning.
وموجود صوتيا لما ألقى محاضرة في الجامعة الإسلامية ووجد الكاميرات نكسها بنفسه وقال لا أحل أحد بصور أو من صورني فليس في حل.
So here he mentions that it was available with his voice, Sheikh Muhammad Salih al-Uthaymin, when he went to the Jamia. He was giving a lecture and he seen the cameras out. He came and he shut them off, he closed them off, and he said, whoever takes a picture of me or records me, then he's not going to be in pardon from me on the Day of Judgment. And here's also, he mentioned Shaykh Muhammad Bajmal.
والعلامة الغديان رحمه الله أخبرني أخ أنه حضر له مجلسا بالرياض، قال كان قبله شخص يدرس وفي كاميرات، ثم كان الدرس بعد ذلك العلامة الغديان، وجاء ذاك يصلح الكاميرات قال له قم بقرابيعك، خذ قرابيعك. نعم.
So once also Sheikh Abdullah Ghudayan, as he was being narrated, there was someone in a masjid giving a talk, and then it was Sheikh Abdullah Ghudayan's turn to speak. So he seen the cameraman, he said, take your stuff and go. Take your stuff and pack it up, basically. So he was stern about this position, and he would hold on to that the da'wah can be conveyed without the need of this affair. And also there's some advice that we shared on Toronto Da'wah of Sheikh Badiuddin al-Sindhi when he was giving advice to Jam'iyyah Ahl al-Hadith when they were using it for da'wah, a stern advice that we can be shared. Also there's advice of Sheikh Muhammad Abdul Wahab al-Banna and Sheikh Muhammad Adam al-Ethiopi where he clarifies this matter, and we know the stance of Sheikh Yahya al-Mudarris, of even senior scholars, Sheikh Abdurrahman Ajlan. And here's some words of Sheikh Abdurrahman al-Barrak about how people blind follow pertain to the verdicts of the scholars in this matter.
والذين يقلدون منهم من يحتج بقول المتأول أو بالعالم المجتهد المتأول يحتج به وإن لم يكن يعني معولا عليه هو سيفعل التصوير. أفتى من أفتى أو لم يفتي.
So he mentions that some people, they're just blind following some of the scholars. Someone that a scholar that particularly may had an interpretation that led him to give this verdict, but they're just using it as a means of justification. Whether that scholar originally given a fatwa or not, this is what they're going to hold on to. And this is what we found some people. Whether you try to explain to them or not, they're just going to do it whether you like it or not.
لكنه يتخذ المفتي ستارة له يدفع بها اللوم عن نفسه. إذا قيل له قالوا فلان أفتى فلان وأفتى. ثم تتابع المفتون في هذا الأمر فعم البلاء وكثر الشر.
So he mentioned the shar and the evil that came about because of this. And because the fatwas was even who said that is allowed for da'wah purposes, they didn't even give a dhabit. And what is it for da'wah? Because initially we said when it was initially started for lesser of two evils, and if you cannot achieve except by doing it, then they have to only also to identify the speaker and so on and so forth, that the benefit is greater. And is it included even just the speaker alone, the sheikh? Here we'll show you some scholars tried to restrict it, but it was even abused in the restriction.
لكن محله في الأظهر في من يحتاج الناس إلى علمه. أما من لا يحتاج الناس إلى علمه فهو في غنى عن التصوير.
So he said, this is for those who are in need of his knowledge. And not every person to come forward on the camera, but those who are in need. So some of them tried to restrict it like that. And even that was abused, misused. You can see that now everyone. And even the affair of da'wah, people don't even, it's more as memorial than da'wah or entertainment. Here's some words of Sheikh Muhammad Salih al-Uthaymeen. People that take a picture of them doing udhiyah or slaughtering. He said, هذه أول مرة أسمع بها. أن الناس يصورون عند الأضحية للذكرى. وأي ذكرى تكون لهذه الأضحية. كل الناس يضحون والذبح كل يعرف أن يذبح. لكن هذه لا شك أنها واردة علينا وإلا فلا نعرفها على كل حال. لا يجوز أن يصور إنسان هذا التصوير ذكرى. يعني it mentions that what people are doing now when they're sacrificing, people assume that this is da'wah, is more for memories. This is what people are doing. Some of them are for entertainment. So what it was initially said for da'wah or greater benefits, it's فتح باب لا يستطاع إغلاقه. It's opening a door that is hard to close later on. And also it opens doors to what initially taswir was haram for, شدة الافتتان والتعلق به. Yani one of the reasons is severe attachment to it. And this is what we find. People now can't even listen to a regular talk without seeing the person. They have to visualize now. And it's affected. And this is even affecting da'wah now. You could give them old statements of great scholars unless you put a picture there, the person will not listen. So this is a mafsad that could perhaps outweigh the good that people are thinking of. Also, there's a booklet written by Sheikh Mahir al-Qahtani titled Ya Du'at al-Khair La Yuta'u Allah Min Haythu Yu'sa. Oh, callers of goodness, Allah is not to be obeyed from where He's disobeyed. And then he titled Hukum Khuruj al-Du'at al-Mashayikh fi al-Tilfaz. And he wrote and he spoke about this for this affair of da'wah, clarified it. He clarified there from about 15 angles why du'at should not be on video. 15 angles, mashallah. Also, here's a verdict of one of the last stages of Lajnatu Da'ima, where they were asked about ta'aleem and so forth. And they mention وقد مضى على الناس قرون وهم في غنى عنها في التعليم والإيضاح. The generations that went by, they were sufficient from it. ومع ذلك أقوى منا علما وأكثر تحصيلا، وما ضرهم ترك الصور في دراستهم، ولا نقص من فهمهم لما أرادوا، ولا من وقتهم وفلسفتهم في إدراك العلوم وتحصيلها. وعلى هذا لا يجوز لنا أن نرتكب ما حرم الله من التصوير لظننا أنه ضرورة، وليس بضرورة لشهادة الواقع بالاستغناء عنه قرونا طويلة. وبالله التوفيق. It's not a ضرورة. يعني we see that da'wah, knowledge, teaching was achieved years. And also Sheikh Lajnat al-Daima also mentioned a qaida of Sheikh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, that when more harm of something outweighs the good, then it becomes haram. And this is what we see, and even the testimony of those. If we led people to become like celebrities, mashayikh have become celebrities now because of this. It's reached to a level where it's a severe attachment. And also no distinction. There's no even more borderlines. If it's for this, it's for that. It's fath bimasra'i. So this is how you have to close it. Bab sidda zari'a. And also Sheikh Ahmed Najmi mentioned in Sharh Kitab al-Tawheed, فهي تعم كل أنواع التصوير، وأشد التصوير ما كان في حركة وكلام، ودون ما كان في صورة بدون حركة ولا كلام، فكل متوعد فاعلها بالعذاب الذي ورد في النصوص. Sometimes he says the most severe is the one with movements and speech. That comes with more effect. Sometimes the harm is greater. طيب, so this is what I just wanted to clarify in a nutshell. We have to remind ourselves we're following a prophet that we haven't even seen. And yet he has the most greatest successful da'is. سماه الله داعيا إلى الله, called him a da'i, and his da'wah was the most effective. So manhaj al-anbiya fi da'wah ila Allah, let's follow that. Their wasail is greater. And here I wanted to end with some words of Shaykh Yahya about this matter, inshallah.
وهذا يسأل عن التصوير في المحاضرات والخطب لقصد نشر العلم، والجواب بارك الله فيك ومن يسمع، نشر العلم هو بالصوت لا بالصورة. ونشر العلم بالكتابة هذه مادة نشر العلم بالكتابة.
So Sheikh was asked about giving da'wah through images and videos and so forth, muhadarat and khutbahs. He said da'wah is through speech and writing and authorship. That's how the original affair of da'wah is.
والتأليف والصوت والكلام. أما الصورة فليست هي نشر العلم. الصورة التصور لغير ما ضرورة معصية، والناس بحاجة إلى علم العالم، وقد يكون غيره أجمل منه.
So he mentions that the people are in need of the knowledge of the scholar, not his image. He said there could perhaps be a scholar that's better looking than him, or more presentable.
هم بحاجة إلى النظر إلى الصورة. هذا علم ابن المبارك، بل هذا علم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلم الصحابة وعلم التابعين. رأينا صورهم؟ ما رأينا، لكن علمهم بين أيدينا ونستفيد من علمهم ولم نرى صورهم. ومن الأمور ما هو ممحقة للعلم وللكتاب.
So he mentions that there's great scholars, Abdullah Mubarak, in fact the Prophet ﷺ, before that, were benefiting from the books, and we haven't even seen their images. So then he goes on to mention that perhaps it can take away from the da'wah at times, and we've seen this huge attachment that has people severe ta'alluq with tasweer. Even those who permit it, they mention this affair. With this we end. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta.